Good day, everyone. Thanks for joining us today on our podcast, Beyond Repair, Crashing the Conversation. Today's topic is on the Blend study, which was released in October of 2022. So it's been around for a couple of years, and our group felt there was merit to talking about it and seeing where has it gone? Has it created impact? Or is it just another report? We definitely get into the topic of profitability and a few key thoughts and concerns about where we are as shop owners, as well as what we can do about it. So we ask that you make some time to listen along. And of course, at the end, look for your feedback and for you to subscribe. Please, by all means, let us know how you're feeling. And of course, if there's any other topics you'd like us to cover, we'd love to hear from you. So enjoy today's show, and thanks for following. All right, welcome, gentlemen. Norm, Todd, Joel, glad to have you on board for today's chat.
Pleasure to be here.
Thanks for having us. Yeah.
Thank you, Lenny.
The topic chosen today is called Blend study. Why are we all mixed up?
Spicy.
And I got to know, guys, why we picked this topic. And I don't mean that in a bad way. It's a bit of a wormhole. I've been doing some research and maybe a little out of touch over the past couple of years myself, but this report, this Blend study, was created by the Society of Collision Repair Specialists back in almost 2 years ago, October 2022. The result of this study was that on average, it took just about 32% more time than a full refinish to do a blend versus the 50% less that we have in our estimating systems. But 2 years later, still, we're talking about it. Why do you guys want to talk about this today?
It's definitely a hot topic, but I wonder how many people actually, shop owners, I mean, when I say people, I wonder how many shop owners have actually read this and how many shop owners are actually discussing it. It's pretty interesting for SCRS to go to the lengths they did, which is incredible. You know, they used this crazy global center of excellence and brought all these paint companies in, all these master painters from every paint company, and it was super controlled. And for them to go to this extent and get so little traction, I think just blows our minds. So I think it's worth talking about.
Yeah, you bring up a good point there too, Todd. And I think the onus is on ownership and management to make the effort to truly read these studies and to help inform everybody about them. And, you know, to just blame everybody else, it wouldn't be right, because even us knowing about this topic today, I think we have all delved into it even more than we had before. And so it's just something that we need to continue to bring to the forefront and share so that we can actually not look back from 2 years and say, well, it got us nowhere.
Yeah. I have to, that is a great question, Lenny. Why are we still talking about why has nothing been done? I don't get it either. I think the main reason why we're talking about it today was a recent ruling in a Montana court. And we can get into that a little bit later if you want, but it's come up again. Someone actually took this to the distance and and was able to get a favorable ruling from court. So, I mean,
and they actually did it on behalf of the customer who had to pay the gap, which, isn't something that we're not allowed to do in this province.
Us either.
So it really like limits shop's ability to actually go to bat for someone. But yeah, they didn't, there was nothing in it for them. They got paid. They actually did it on behalf of their customer, which I think is incredible.
We'll put a link in with this podcast, but this is on the ARA BC website, and it's a 35 page report that we encourage everyone to read if you haven't. And if you own a business, share it with your staff and educate your staff as to what's going on in the industry. And from there, how do we keep this conversation going? The whole goal of this podcast is to make space for shops to talk. So I would hope that after this session, we get shops reaching out and saying like, hey, here's where I'm at, or here's my concerns. Heck, I wouldn't mind hearing from an insurance company or from an estimating company if we can. So calling all listeners, if you're out there, let us know. This is not, I think, a report to cause strife. It's to say, listen, we have something to talk about here. So let's get into it. We have major two estimating systems here in Canada, which are Mitchell and Autotex.
Yeah.
The CCC motor estimating system is not something that I know of us using in Canada. I know it's big in the USA, I'm told. Anyone seen anything change in Mitchell or Autotex since the study came out? I mean, they're the ones who generate the labor times, isn't it?
Well, yeah, and I was doing a little bit of digging on this, and so Repair Driven News had some stuff out there. So CCC was the first to react, and they had a phased rollout beginning in early 2023 and updating some of its what do they call it, work time development methodology. Wow, that's a big word for a Frenchman. That's a tough one,
methodology.
right? Yeah, that's the word I'm looking for. So, but and then Autodex was the next one to do something about it, and then Mitchell dragged their feet, and there's been no significant changes. But all I see, end result, all I see is the ability for the user to manually change that times. It's not like they came back and said, well, we don't agree with the time, we don't disagree with the time. They kind of just put their hands up and said, hey, well, we're just going to back away and let the insurance companies in the shop figure it out. And it's a little disheartening to hear that because, I mean, aren't they the self-proclaimed experts in
they are the
studies?
IPs, right? Like that, 100%.
So for them, I mean, I'm only going to speculate here, but for them to put their hands up and not even attempt to either duplicate the study with a similar or different result just tells me that they don't want to be the ones to basically tell the insurance companies that they got to pay more, right?
Why would that be?
Well, and that's, as shops, there's two variables here, right? We have the estimating software that provides the time, and we have the insurance companies that pay the rate. And those are the two dials that we can turn externally, at least. I mean, there's lots of factors within our control, of course, but so we rely on what is supposed to be a third party supplying that data, regarding the time it takes to perform these operations. Now, we already know that all that data was already measured on brand new undamaged panels. We already had that working against us. So I don't know about you guys, but I was expecting them to come back with, okay, either we agree with what they said and we're going to change it, or we disagree, we're going to do our own study. But neither of those things has happened.
There's some unofficial, like there was some closed door. I think it was Motor. Don't quote me on that, but that actually did, after this study, conducted some of their own internal studies. And that is what drove them to add some flexibility. They didn't just come out and say, hey, we disagree or we agree. They sort of stayed very neutral. But they did allegedly did some of their own studies, and I assume they found similar results, because if they didn't, why would they provide the flexibility?
Right. And if they did find similar results, then why didn't they just come out and say it?
Yeah. And I don't know if even Autotex Canada and Autotex USA are different programs, but the one thing that the estimating systems, I know Motor said they would. This is Autotex, who now allows you to go into the threshold base and either go from 50% to 150%. Again, that now raises the question, should you be going into your estimating system and adjusting that? And where does that now land with the insurance?
We're not allowed. There is no adjustment of a collision repair profile. Like, you're not allowed to adjust that. That's fixed. That's that's just not allowed. So we can do it on our other profiles that we use for customer pay, that kind of thing. But for the actual insurance, no chance.
right?
Right.
And again, not at all advocating that everyone jumps and does that. What I would say is that in this situation right now, it does still raise conversation. And I'm curious, each of you had a chance to talk to either your fellow shops, your insurance partners, or even your customers about this.
We've had internal talks. We're definitely not talking to customers and insurance companies about this at this point. I actually believe that the ARA has been attempting to get a response out of ICBC on it, but I don't know whether they've received one. But internally, you just get eye rolls from painters because, being a ticketed painter myself, and then now having like a handful of painters on staff, when you tell them the results of this study, they all roll their eyes and go, it's like, yeah, thanks for the tip. Like, I think the industry has just known this forever. And we've been rolling with what we get, right? It's like, oh, okay, well, unless the IPs like Mitchell and Autotex, unless they're going to go and reformulate their guide, like that's what's setting the standard to the insurance companies, right? Is the guide. The insurance companies, I'm sure you guys see the same thing. The insurance company says, well, the guide says this. So if the guide updates and the insurance companies adopt or accept the updated guide because they accept the guide in every other way, we're talking about like huge increase in paint costs, whether it's material costs and labor costs. Huge, 70, 85% on blend panels. Like that's a massive 80, whatever it is, 82%. Like that's a massive change for an insurance company. So of course, like there's probably, is there pressure from the insurance companies to the IPs saying, don't you dare? Like, we're your customers. We're bigger customers than all these shops. I don't know.
It definitely factors in. And, like it kind of brings in the case of, so costs are going to go up. Where are we going to find the dollars to take away? Right. Because they want to maintain the status quo. Okay. And so, like it brings in, total cost of claim once again, and severity on vehicles, and these are questions.
The S word. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Here we go.
Yeah. So now we're into another conversation where it's where are we going? Where's insurance going, and where is Mitchell and Autotex going with this subject? So it's brutal.
And I just want to make sure this is on record what each of us defines severity as. What creates severity?
Are you looking from an insurance standpoint, or are you talking just like our own personal opinion?
Well, I guess it's from ultimately the repairer. For us, it was always what's best for the vehicle.
Yes. See, that's where I was going with that. Is that like for me, what creates severity is the accident and the vehicle's ability to absorb, deflect, however, or whatever it does. I mean, it has nothing to do with dollars and cents. Severity is like how it's the vehicle.
And how is severity built into vehicles to optimize part sales?
That's a whole nother thing.
Wow, we're opening way too many doors here.
Whoa, I heard the whistle blow on that one. I think we went outside there for a
We'll
sec.
put that one on another podcast.
Parts of that.
Where I'm going with it, guys, is that all three of you are on this podcast because I know you and I've been to your shops. I've seen how you operate, and you do fix the car.
That's
the right way. You do what's best for the vehicle so that it's back on the road to a condition that's obviously not like new, but post repair proper.
Thanks.
The reason why I want to make sure we're clear on the term severity, because it's been a word that's been constantly thrown around and even caused fear. Well, if we increase costs to repair like blend studies, it's going to write off more vehicles. And nobody wants to see more write-offs, but that doesn't mean we're not going to fix the car properly.
Yeah, 100%.
Just making sure we're clear on that.
Well, and I mean, whatever gap lies there between compensation and proper repair is always being absorbed by the repair facilities, because ultimately we're the ones holding the bag at the end of the day, right? And I think, the blend conversation falls right into that, is how much are we going to absorb before we say no more? we've had enough. We can't absorb anymore. Because back to your question about severity, if we want to talk about the dollars and cents aspect of it, it's the cost of repairing the vehicle while maintaining proper business margins to afford to pay our technicians properly, attract young talent, have proper equipment, have proper training. If we can't maintain proper margin to maintain those parts of our business, then we're not around and cars aren't getting fixed at all, right? They're damaged, they're written off, So the conversation's so circular, but I think the whole, the goalposts have always shifted, right, when it comes to severity and the actual cost of repairing a vehicle. So it's a slippery slope. And back to what Todd said earlier about why we're not having these conversations, why we're not pushing an issue. This is the same thing over and over again. How many shop owners were hoping that someone was going to take the lead on the blend study and finally blow this thing open? And when it finally happens, guess what? The people who are supposed to be looking out for our best interests in formulating those repair times step back. And now it falls on a negotiation between the shop and the insurance company, which is the last thing we wanted, because
and they're saying repair by repair basis. Like, it's like, you've got to be crazy. Like, there's no way that's ever going to work. And they know it.
For sure. So I can actually feel the eye rolls from all the shop owners out there saying that's why we didn't get excited about this, because we knew it was just going to fall back to this point. And I think it's our jobs as people in the industry to talk about it and not accept it. Like, this is garbage. It's a lot of things. Like, garbage was the nicest word I could find, but it's yeah.
Garbage in, garbage out.
Don't hold back, Norm. Tell us how you really feel.
No. It's only episode 2. I'll be nice.
The word guide came up earlier, Todd. I think I heard you say, and that comes from the estimating companies saying this is just a guide. And I want to know, Joe, we did some work creating a profitability process. We brought some shops together and we talked about what is the proper way to get compensated for additional paint materials.
Mm-hmm.
And so a process was created in order to ensure that, you used your scale properly. It printed out what volumes were used. You balanced that against the actual estimate. And in some cases, there was a significant difference. Can you share a little bit of that experience?
Well, yeah, especially when you get into some of the specialty colors. You got that nice Chrysler white pearl that they put on their big Dodge mega cabs.
Looks like mud, but it costs a fortune.
It's very, very expensive. That color has bit us in the ass quite a few times. We have submitted our paint materials. We have been paid. Sometimes customers had to pay because in Alberta we can do that. We have lost files because of asking for a customer to pay, and they just say, you know what? No, I'm going to go someplace else.
Yeah.
So we've won some, we've lost some. But then we also have some business owners that are in profitable businesses kind of seeing our story and going, damn, yeah, we'll pay that. That's kind of the right thing to do. We don't tell you to pay us less when you contract us. We're not going to do the same either. So we have gotten some wins there. And then there's some insurance companies that are just literally telling their customers before an estimate is even, or an assignment is even sent, that you're going to have an $800 copay to go with this. They're telling them that right off the bat. Very frustrating because they're picking a random number out of the air. Whether it's a big claim or a small claim, 800 is a pretty big number to scare people away. Most of the time, it's a couple $100. That's it.
And that's if it's not something supplemented properly for and reviewed by the insurance company. It would then be passed along to the customer. You two, Norm and Todd, is that even something that's a possibility, using your paint scale and making sure you actually show how much material?
There for some time, extra materials were considered, and extra time was considered for certain colors. I want to say probably 6 or 7 years ago, ICBC had a special paint code thing going where they would pay us additional operations. And then you hear that, a rep from a paint company told ICBC that, well, you can cheat this and you can cheat that and you can sort of make this work. Like 4G was a good one because you had to spray it dark gray. and then clear it and flat sand it and then spray it with the aluminum and then clear it again. And oh yeah, you can cheat that. So, now they're like, well, we heard you can cheat it, so we're not going to pay you that anymore. And it's like, oh yeah, maybe they're getting away with it on a bumper cover, but like, you can't actually really cheat that. It looks terrible.
No.
But I actually pulled up my most recent Paint Manager report from September. And I was just going through it, just looking at paint material margins. And, I know some of these jobs sort of firsthand. And, what's astonishing to me is how many of these are minus 100, 105, 102% profit on paint.
Mm-hmm.
So our overall GP, like for this location, which has pretty good revenue, was only 14% on paint materials in September. I have a job here. It's a 9.3 hour job. Paint material sales, 537.17. Paint cost, 1,085.76. Like, and there's a ton of them. Like, there's a ton that we manage. I would say probably, I think that we're losing money on 30% of the cars that we paint. Like actually straight loss. And the only thing, the other, say, 70% of cars that we paint, we're making just enough margin to squeak by. And, not to mention the fact that we just think that, like, and especially in one of our stores, we literally blend everything, every direction, every way you can. Like, we're dealing with, high-end cars, complicated tri-coat paint jobs and, tinted red clear coats and this kind of thing. And in particular, that location is becoming extremely hard to schedule for because the paint labor times are not actually reflective of the amount of effort having to go into that car. And so paint is just constantly behind because they just simply cannot perform the work. And I mean, they're incredibly productive people, but from a scheduling standpoint, it's just becoming more and more apparent that you need like one-to-one techs, like a collision tech to every painter, because otherwise they can't keep up.
Are you telling me that your refinish team isn't 140% efficient, like the best ones out there in the world?
I'm not going to tell you my actual paint shop efficiency because I feel like that might slant the conversation. But, when you talk about real, refinish costs, like we are making, our average sales is 57.66 and our average cost is 49.46. Like, you can't run a business on it.
No.
And just so we're clear, even the technology these days to be able to measure paint and track usage is pretty accurate.
Yeah, very.
Gone are the days, I would hope, pots of paint laying around. Yeah.
It's like you would be astonished. And this is just wet costs. This does not include tape and paper and this and that. Like, I bet you our paint shop's running neutral some months. And when you compare that to our QuickBooks, like, it's dead accurate. Like, the scale, as long as your painters are using the scales properly, it's incredible data.
And Norm, just same question: have you successfully been able to, prove and supplement for additional materials? And let's not kid ourselves, even times.
Yeah, well, it's the way it's set up here in Manitoba is MPI allows us to submit a form, and part of that process includes us giving them our scale printout and showing our cost on paint. So if we have $500 worth of paint materials on the claim, and our cost is $4.99, we get nothing. If our cost is $5.01, they'd give me $1. So, and that's a whole other rabbit hole that we're not going to go down today. This expectation that cost, that we operate at cost. Oh, let me just recoup my costs on paint. That doesn't fly. But I totally agree with what Todd just rambled on for 3 hours about. That was bang on.
Thanks, Norm. I knew you'd get me
Yeah.
going on something.
Well, but it was good. And I think your voice is much more soothing than mine. So people would rather hear it from you. But that's exactly it. If you start looking at that paint manager report, you'll drive yourself crazy. Especially, I don't know about you guys, but like bumper jobs, like just a bumper, forget about it. You're gonna
Forget
be
about it.
in the rhubarb
You're
on that
losing.
one all day
Yeah.
long. So you can't, if you zoom in that close, you're gonna leave the keys at the front door and walk away. So don't do that. But this expectation that it all works out in the wash. But and this comes back to a statement that I made in the first podcast about knowing our numbers, right? So we talked about, what Todd did, just like zooming right in on something, but there's also that high view of, okay, where do I end up at the end of the month, at the end of 3 months, at the end of the year? And if you don't know that and you don't understand that, then shut up. You can't complain, because that drives me bonkers. And we see that all the time. Shop owner gets his bill from his paint supplier and has no idea what his revenue was, has no idea what his margin is, but just on a bad day. And then he complains to the insurance company, and then the insurance company asks him what his margin is, or anybody asks him what the margin is, and they don't know the answer to that, which is just absolutely doing the industry such a big disservice. So if you're going to step up and complain and say something, you better know what you're talking about, because you're going to look like a fool otherwise. These insurance companies will eat you up and spit you out. So let's just get that out of the way.
Like going back to an episode of Dragon's Den, and they ask somebody
Yeah,
about their
totally,
numbers, and they're like, "Well, you don't know your numbers? Like, get out of here!" Like,
Yeah,
there's no
well, I don't know my
chance we're
numbers,
gonna-
but my bill was really high. What are they going to say? I mean, if your margins are good and you get a high bill from your paint supplier, you should be happy, right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
So to answer your question, I guess, Lenny, the process, I feel, first of all, to submit to get that, that compensation where you fell short, is very complex, and at best you will recoup your costs. So it's not very
And I bet
encouraging.
you, if you consider your time and effort that it takes to submit that bill, they're just counting on you going, "That's just not worth it," unless
Totally.
it's double, or something crazy.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
any process that makes you spend an extra $20, $30 on labor to collect $15
Yeah, forget it.
just gets very, very frustrating after a
Only
while.
only government can get away with that kind of
Yeah,
thing.
right. I was just gonna say only the
They-
public insurers will spend
Yep, they'll
$5
throw
to recoup one.
thousands of dollars out to recover 30. Like, they just,
Right.
because that's how they can roll. Because
Yeah.
precedence is more important than cost to them.
Interesting. Norm, you had said something about if you don't know your numbers, then shut up.
Did I say that?
It's okay. What could somebody do to educate themselves? How does a shop owner go about understanding their numbers? And I'm talking like simple, basic. Who could they go to? How could they lean on other maybe fellow shops? But what can we do to get people to educate themselves on their numbers so that everyone is talking the same tune? Any
Well,
suggestions?
I'll share my story with you guys, because I think it's probably a very common experience. I was a technician who became a shop owner. I thought I can paint a car so I can run a business, which, let's face it, that's what happens a lot of times. And I have to admit that looking back at some of the decisions that were made, I am very fortunate to even be part of this conversation here today. But there's one particular moment that sticks out in my mind, and that was when I had joined the performance group with PPG, and Tom Bissonnette was running it for a short stint, or was brought in. So he ran the first meeting, realized that a lot of us had no handle whatsoever in our financials, so kind of took a step back in kind of a understanding your financials 101. And I'll never forget that moment. I brought my QuickBooks file and I was absolutely embarrassed. And I know that wasn't the intent, but anybody who takes pride in what they do, I'm one of those guys, right? How you do anything is how you do everything. And I just felt like I had dropped the ball. The conversation around the room, I wasn't even a part of it. I didn't understand my financials. For the next year, I went back to basics, right? My QuickBooks files, my chart of accounts made 0 cents. It had been set up in a way for a generic business, not for a collision repair shop. So I had to start understanding what it should look like in the first place, having conversations, leaning on others in my performance group to understand what I was doing. And it took the better part of a year for me to climb out of that hole where I could now be a part of the conversation and say, all right, now that I get it, it's time to talk about it. And I think that's a necessary step. And for some people, that's going to happen early on in their journey, and others it's going to happen later on. But hopefully you make it long enough to figure it out, because unfortunately some people just never make it.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think that there's still like a pretty decent amount of shops that don't even run a management system, let alone a system that talks to their paint computer and, connects directly with Mitchell or audits. It's like, come on, guys, like, get on the program. How do you expect an insurance company to take you seriously when you run your business like that?
That's a good point. And again, Norm, what you shared about getting some help, it sounds like, some fellow shops would be helpful. Now that we run our own coaching business for body shops, we've had a significant request to help shops with the financial side. And
I see where you were going with this. I got you.
I'm just getting started, buddy.
Shameless plug.
Hook, line, and sinker.
What I love is that we're getting asked, like Todd mentioned last podcast, about that guy who's 20 grand in the hole and just about on his way out. Those are the shops that are asking us, like, if we can't get help, we're done. And so back to maybe, ignorance may seem like a harsh thing. I think a lot of people are just freaked out, like many of businesses. But in this industry, we know those guys, right? We've hung out with them at the PPG groups, and whether they've actually successfully implemented things that they learned. Again, these are the guys, like you said, Norm, working in the shop, painting cars because their painter quit or got hired somewhere else, or couldn't make it in for the day because they had to look after their kids in daycare. Like, at the end of the day, our goal out of this podcast is to help people. So I'm glad to hear that you had a positive experience out of a negative situation. Again, anything we can do to get the message out that there is always help, even when you're feeling pretty helpless. So so call 1-800-KAIZEN.
There it is. There's the plug.
Bottom line, profitability wise, you as shop owners getting paid the fair amount for labor and materials to refinish vehicles.
Was that a real question?
Is that a real question? Yeah. And it's not even close. I wish I had it in front of me, but my brother tracked minimum wage over 15 years in this province and tracked it against the rates paid by the insurance company. And, you can only imagine what happened is minimum wage has gone like this and rates have gone. And the disparity every year and they're set by fundamentally the same group of people. Definitely don't want to increase rates or increase the labor or to fix the car properly. Like, that would be bad for business.
Well, and total losses are definitely driving insurance costs more than anything else right now. To me, that's the elephant in the room that isn't really being looked at. We can keep paint material costs down, and that's working good for us. We're going to keep doing that. But the real part of the problem is the total cost of claim and total losses. How does that solution get rectified so that maybe they'll say, you know what, let's give them their paint materials, but we're going to go work with the OEMs to make cars more repairable, to limit how those costs are just attributed to these small little freak accidents. You lose a headlight and a fender and a bumper, and it's a 5-year-old car with 120,000 K. That thing's got life, man. That car could go for 5-10 more years. But no, it's a total loss.
Yeah, because it's 10 grand to fix it or whatever.
The OEM puts another car into the world, and the insurance company had to pay out a total loss instead of fixing a car that could keep going. Presents environmental problems as well too, which you think our governments are pushing on us left hand everywhere, but that's not part of the equation either. So yeah, they're going to keep pushing on us, but I would rather see the OEMs come to the table here and let's solve this problem. Let's make these cars more repairable.
Yeah, and that's exactly it, because the cost of insurance has not risen kind of hand in hand with the cost of repairing the vehicles. And that is driven by the OEMs, but it's also driven by customer expectation, by consumer expectation, right? I mean, it'd be a rare occurrence, but just to prove a point. Change a seat in a vehicle today. It's got a speaker. It's got a massage bladder in there. It's got heating. It's got cooling. Change a seat in 1990 Cutlass. These are two completely different things. Have insurance costs gone up accordingly? And the answer is no. Now, is raising the cost of insurance a popular topic? Of course it isn't. But that's exactly what Joel was saying. That they've been relying on suppressing their costs at the shop level. Our insurance company just went to the PUB, the Public Utilities Board, asked for a 3% increase on rates for next year. They publicly admitted that their actuaries told them they actually need 6. Where is the 3% going to come from? I mean, I barely passed math class, and I know that's going to be a problem.
So come from somewhere.
It's got to come from somewhere, right? So if the expectation is that it's going to come from the trade, then what are we going to do when there's nobody left to fix the car?
Well, and I think that circles back to this blend study thing a little bit, because if you can't get insurance, these IPs to update their guides to be relevant and sort of tell the insurance companies, look, tough beans, this is actually the reality. Sorry, I understand you're our customers or whatever, but this is actually the reality of what it takes. It sort of flows through, and you're not going to have, if a technician has to work way too hard to make what a competitive wage as, say, an electrician or a plumber or whatever, just comparing apples to apples, if they feel like, gosh, I have to work so hard and the expectations are so high on my results, if the compensation doesn't match the effort, they just won't stay in the industry. They'll just go somewhere else. I got to tell you that crimping PEX pipes together is not very complicated, but it pays really well compared to fixing this 4, 5, 6,000 pound missile that goes flying down the road and is supposed to protect your family in the case of it. You think about the consequences, it's pretty high. So I think we're, I don't know about your guys' markets, but in our market, everybody has more than they can do. So, telling us that you'll fix less cars is well, we're fixing less cars anyways. That's just the reality of it. There isn't enough people. The amount of salvage is just insane because they can't find people to fix these cars. They just sit in tow yards for.
Had a shower yesterday, kind of like Norm. Some of my best ideas come there as well too. And I was kind of, just thinking of ways that insurance could influence how cars are built in order to help lower severity. And wouldn't it be a novel idea if I bought a Chevy truck and Norm bought a Dodge truck and we both had the same accident and mine was 10,000 and Norm's was 2,000. And the OEMs, the insurance companies said, you know what, that Chevy is more insurance and that Dodge, we're going to charge less to insure that vehicle. Wouldn't that drive consumers to buy cars that are cheaper to insure?
You would think, Joel, but in this province, they already do that. They already have rate classes for different vehicles, and depending on the number, you pay more insurance, but it doesn't seem to deter anybody.
Yeah, but is that rate set on the cost of the vehicle or on
from what I understand, it's based on cost of repair. But I could be wrong. That's something I was told years ago when I was like, what are these rate classes? What's a rate class 10 versus a rate class 25? And they said, oh, that's completely based on the cost to repair the average claim on it.
Yeah.
So why am I driving the Dodge? I just want clarification on that. What would I do to deserve the Dodge?
I don't know, man. Sorry.
I heard you're into tough margins, and the resale value on the Dodge isn't very good. So you're taking a loss there, just like you are in your paint materials.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough.
But you brought it back to the blend study, and again, Joel and Norm, what do we want to share with the industry about what to do with this report?
Well, I got a few legal things I want to get out there, because I feel like if I don't get this out there, my research was was for
Insane.
nothing.
Yeah, let's go. I want to hear
And
this.
so I just want to share some stuff with you. So again, I mentioned earlier in the podcast that what happened in Montana. So I'm just going to read a little bit of a snippet here. The Montana Insurance Department responded to a complaint against Liberty Mutual challenging the insurer's denial of a repair costs. Liberty Mutual rejected charges for paint blending, citing a 50% blend time policy. The department refuted this, referencing a 2022 study showing blending takes more time. It criticized Liberty Mutual for not supporting its claims with evidence and ordered them to pay. This case highlights broader concerns about insurance practices in covering the full repair cost. Liberty Mutual reimbursed the claimant $340. So, a couple of interesting takeaways here, because if you read the whole article, they cite some local law and they talk about, I'm just going to scroll down to it, an Unfair Trade Practice Act, which is in Montana, but is also something that is present in other states across the United States. Like key provisions: failing to acknowledge or act promptly on claims, denying claims without proper investigation, refusing to pay claims without providing reasonable explanation, and misrepresenting policy provisions. So a lot of states have this in place. So my worry when I first read the article and it referred Montana state law was, okay, is this something that is only going to apply in Montana? But from what I'm reading, it appears that there's similar acts in other states. So the next thing was to see, well, what about Canada? And so things are a little bit different in Canada. And it says here they're regulated on provincial and territorial basis. So Alberta has the Alberta Insurance Act, Ontario has the same, BC has the same. And in addition, there's the Insurance Bureau of Canada, IBC. So there's a lot of different governing bodies in Canada. So I guess the summary of the story is, does this set a precedent? And from what I'm seeing and what I'm reading is that it very well might set a precedent in the States. But because that, the United States has a whole other law system, I mean, it doesn't set necessarily a precedent in Canada, although we have similar provisions in some of our laws here provincially. I really don't know what's going to come to this, right? What's going to happen? Are other insurance companies going to bite the bullet and just say, okay, well, this is going to land on our lap eventually. We got to get ahead of this, or are they just going to wait for it? And also, the big thing that sticks out to me is blending in 2022 versus blending in 2024 versus blending in 2008 hasn't changed. So what about all the losses the industry incurred in all that time? What happens then? What does this set as a precedent for that? Right? So
Yeah. Even though we could argue that colors are getting more complicated, manufacturers are trying really hard to sell cars, and so they got to have the fanciest glass flake or whatever. The reality is, in the last 20 years, in my experience, blending hasn't changed much.
no.
The only thing that I can see from my point of view is that in this province, the insurance company has only really warmed up to blending properly in the last 8 to 10 years. They would never allow a blend up or onto a hood, but we will let it down the side where, the customer may see it. Like there was lots of like things that we navigated over the years. And I think it was only within the last 10 that they came out with real blending policies that said, if you're replacing or repairing a panel within a distance of an adjacent panel, you can blend that as long as the panel condition warrants it.
Right.
If it's a beat down, rusty, chipped up, well, of course, like that doesn't for anybody. So even the fact that it took so long for them to normalize that blending was an acceptable operation, I think that we're going to be pushing water uphill a long time for them to acknowledge that actually this is harder than painting a panel. Like blending a panel is harder than painting. It always has. That's just the reality. It takes way more time. It might arguably take less material, because you're putting less base color on it or whatever. And there might be an argument there that they're like, whoa, hey, wait, like if we put 130% refinish time on that, it doesn't necessarily justify 130% of the material cost of the refinish panel, right? So, and I think probably from I'm sure it uses less material, but it does take way more time. So, I think those are challenges that the insurance companies, even if they are looking at this as a relevant study, which I don't know how they can deny that, but if they are looking at it, they're probably like, how are we going to handle this one?
Yeah, that's a good point. And in back to your comment about the rules on blending, I mean, I love how these rules come about, right? An insurance company determines when to blend. I mean, we're not allowed, if we're replacing just a bumper cover, we're not blending. Well, we are blending. Sorry, I should say that, but we're not getting paid for it.
We're not getting
right?
paid for it.
There's rules about gap between the panels. So box side to cab corner doesn't qualify. What they call the mating flange between the two panels has to be a certain amount, right? Even though we're seeing that a lot of times on those bumper covers that snap in to those retainers to the quarter and the fender. So it's meeting the criteria, but someone along the way at an insurance company just made up these rules, just said, no, we're not going to pay blend on that. Well, who sets that standard, right?
Yeah.
Why do you get to set that? So, I mean, maybe we've opened up more questions than we've provided answers with this podcast,
Perfect. But that's what we want, brother.
Yeah, totally. I don't
mean,
think the goal is to answer all the questions.
Totally.
Anyway, just keep
asking. We could use like the Henry Ford model and just say you can have any color you want as long as it's black, and we're good.
But what color of black do I get? Because
Right,
there's a lot of variation there.
And does it have to be a Dodge, Joe?
Yeah. Oh.
Was that PXR or whatever it is?
Yeah.
PXR. Well, that's blendable. That's not black. That's black pearl.
So, Joel, thoughts on this report? What do we do with the blend study?
I say that we continue to share it with the industry and with our local shops, and we continue to push it on our estimates. When we're sending in claims, we need to continually be asking for the paint materials, but also using this as a source to, this is why. You talked about, who's making those rules. And sometimes it's just a claims rep at a computer that doesn't know any better, but that's what they were told. Right.
Well, and the age-old response too, why isn't everyone else asking for this?
Right.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
That one never gets
just
old.
kidding. They might be. They just would never tell you. You're the only one. Always.
Yeah. We've been the only one a long time.
Yeah. Same here.
No, and thanks, Joel,
Ever
because again,
since day one.
that's a big part of what the profitability process you worked a lot with your local shops on is do it right, do it fair, be clear,
Yep.
right? Take your photos, take your time, document, and provide backup. Do at least that. That would be my, number one stressor.
And know your numbers, right?
Yep. Know your numbers.
And I think it's probably about time, which I don't know in your guys' provinces, but I think in this province, it's about time that we put some pressure on our industry association to start putting pressure on insurance company, government, whatever. Let's get some movement on this thing.
Yeah.
There's no way that you can discredit the research and the controls that they had in place on this thing.
Norm here just kind of cited some legal precedent in the States. And, we all know that the States are really, really good at being litigious and following through on that stuff. Whereas we Canadians don't tend to like to use the court system to our advantage.
We're too polite.
100%. And maybe that is definitely the way to go. We need lawyers, we need MLAs and MPs to be informed and understanding of these situations, and lobby groups to work for us, whether that's through our associations or whether there's a national association. That can really help bring us all together. So it's not just, you're the only one asking for this, right? But
that's a good point. I was just going to say that's a tangible takeaway right there. At the shop level, if your MLA should know about this blend study, your MLA should understand what's going on. And if you don't know who your MLA is, I suggest you get out there and find out and sit down with them. They're there to work for you, supposedly, right? So get out there, visit with them, inform them, and let's put that pressure on government and on insurance companies to do the right thing. Sorry, I cut you off there, Joel. I didn't like that Dodge comment. So
Norm's been great at keeping the conversation to a dull roar. I want to just put it out there to everybody. Love to know that we have somebody in the insurance world listening, in the automaker industry, the estimating, but inside the shops as well. You know, people who do the work. We had some feedback from our last podcast. It's a gentleman that started from scratch as a painter for me, and he's loving it. So how do we get this, you know, not just a podcast, but the topics out to people, and then looking for feedback, please sending in questions, you know, challenge us. That's why we're doing this. We want to be in front of other shop owners that are having the same thoughts, but we're not going to continue to suppress it. We want to have real conversations. We want to make sure that
100%.
everybody does do what we're called to do in society, which is be respectful, and let's do it right. So appreciate each and every one of you guys, and especially for taking time out of your regular business day to do this podcast. We're excited to see what feedback we can get. And yeah, if there was anything else, last words you have for any listeners, guys, please throw it in there before we sign off.
No, I got nothing. Get involved. Get to know your numbers.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Start
I
getting
would agree.
involved. Start paying attention.
Yeah, exactly. And one thing you guys probably noticed, there's no sponsors on here, right? This is us. I mean, we're doing that. So all we ask in exchange is that if this podcast made you think, it made you, you know, talk, it stimulated something, share it, get it out there. Let's get people talking.
You betcha.
I would welcome anybody who has watched this to send me some of your auto body swag, and I will wear it on the next podcast and represent
I love
your
that.
company.
Oh, good call.
I
Yeah.
Well played.
that.
Well played.
A little
Nice.
bit self-serving, but you know,
Yeah. I'll send
it's
you
the right
something.
thing to do.
Yeah, no doubt.
I still have an
No.
e-transfer to you the money for this podcast, Joel.
Right. Yeah. Checks in the mail, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
Nailed.
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
all right, guys. Thanks so much. We'll call it. And yeah, we'll look forward to the next podcast.
Take care.
Sounds good.